This is the first installment of the Johto starters versus the Kanto starters. Today, we're going to do playthroughs with the grass starters, so who's going to be faster beating Pokemon Crystal, Meganium or Venusaur? For these playthroughs, I'm going to be using my standard rules, so that's only my starter in battle, no items in battle except held items, no glitches or exploits, and no evasion boosting moves until my Pokemon reaches level 100. There's a more extended version of these rules in the description, so you can check them out there if you're curious. So now, let's get into the playthroughs. I think there is an overwhelming consensus on the internet that Meganium just might be one of the worst starters ever created. Honestly, for me, that is not because of the design. This thing is very cute. While I do like Bayleaf a little bit more, I really like Meganium's design, and I actually think it is a very good starter when compared with the first 6 from the early generations. However, we start to run into problems when we look at its base stats. It has 80 HP, 82 attack, 100 defense, 83 special attack, 100 special defense, and 80 speed. So it's pretty balanced in everything, and then it has exceptional defenses. However, when you're playing these games as a kid especially, when you pick up your starter, what you don't want is for it to be a defensive beast. Plus, I've heard rumors that Johto is quite cruel to grass types, and that makes me worried for this playthrough specifically. By the way, this is actually the first Generation 2 grass type run that I will be doing on the channel. Now, while its base stats might not be good for solo speedrunning the game, at least it does have a medium slow growth rate, which is the best growth rate for this kind of format. Additionally, Meganium has a fantastic moveset for the early game. It starts with Tackle, Growl, Razor Leaf, and Reflect. Here I should mention that Razor Leaf is a high critical hit ratio move. Now, it doesn't work like it did in Generation 1 where the Pokemon's base speed determines their critical hit rate. In Generation 2, critical hits were just turned into a flat 6.25% chance. However, moves with an increased critical hit rate actually score these 25% of the time, which is really fantastic. Okay, so let's continue going through Meganium's move pool. Through Level Up, it learns Poison Powder, Synthesis, Body Slam, Light Screen, Safeguard, and Solar Beam. Obviously, all the tools it needs to be an absolute defensive beast. Through TMs and HMs, it gets access to Headbutt and Return, but it doesn't get access to Swift. And it also gets access to moves like Sunny Day, which pairs very well with Solar Beam. Giga Drain is a decent option for damage and recovery at the same time. And then Earthquake, Fury Cutter, and Mud Slap for coverage. Of course, Gligar is very sad. For these challenges, I always make sure that the rival picks the starter that I am weakest against. The reason is that in Generation 2, he is supposed to pick the Pokemon that is strong against you, so this feels like it's in the spirit of the game for me. Also, in general, the rival in Generation 2 is not particularly good unless you're running like a Corsola, so I don't expect too many problems from him today. Against him in my first battle, I take an easy victory with Meganium. Alright, so let's head off towards Violet City. Along this route, I'm going to fight all of the optional trainers. I just want to get a decent number of levels before I end up fighting Falkner. On my way, I run into a Bellsprout, which I'm going to catch. I will talk about this later on in this series, because I'm starting to think that this is not the right HM user to use Cut with. And then, after obtaining it, I head into Violet City, and I go to Sprout Tower. Now, you might be a little bit confused about this if you have watched any of my recent live streams or my Lugia highlights video, and the reason I'm going in here is because I filmed this playthrough a while ago. It was actually filmed on April 10th, and I had no idea that I wanted to cut Sprout Tower out of my route yet. So in this starter series, my second playthroughs are all going to cut Sprout Tower out, but my first playthroughs will include them. This is because I played all of the initial playthroughs with the starters over the course of 3 days back to back. I really wanted to get results within a short period of time, just so that they would be very comparable, and I wasn't applying a lot of new learning to the game to make one Pokemon better than the others. Also here, I think it will be interesting to quantify exactly how much time is spent in Sprout Tower. So in this case, when I took my first step towards the tower, breaking the routing that would have just gone to Falkner's gym, the clock was at 5 minutes and 26 seconds. And then once I defeat the Sage and leave the tower via escape rope, the clock is at 7 minutes and 2 seconds. For Meganium, this area of the game took 1 minute and 36 seconds to complete, but it also did raise my level 4 times. So now there isn't really anything to do other than head into the flying type gym. The first bird keeper, Abe, has a Spearow who knows Peck, which is super effective, so I go for Reflect on the first turn to cut its damage. After that it is doing almost nothing, and then I two-shot it with Tackle, so there was nothing to worry about, and I think that that is also going to be the case against Faulkner. His lead is Pidgey. Now this thing knows Mud Slap, but it's not going to use it against me because grass types resist ground type moves. What this means is his first Pokemon is stuck using only Tackle, and with a defensive beast like Meganium, I am not scared of this at all. Also, I outspeed because his Pokemon are so underleveled, and I can just set up Reflect for free here before knocking the bird out. Now you will notice that I'm choosing Razor Leaf here. That is specifically because it has a high crit rate, and also its effective power, even when not very effective, is higher than Tackle's effective power. Both moves have the same accuracy, so obviously going for Razor Leaf is the better choice because it has greater upside. I finish his lead off, he sends in Pidgeotto. Now this thing does know a flying type move, so it's going to spam Gust against me. However, with Reflect in place, I am taking so little damage, and Razor Leaf is doing a third each time it hits. Obviously, Faulkner is not going to be able to finish me off here, so I take the Pidgeotto out. I have a chance to learn Poison Powder here, which I teach in the place of Growl, and with that I have earned myself the first badge. Alright, so with that first section of the game out of the way, I think we have a feel for how Meganium is going to play. And now let's switch over and see its competitor. Venusaur, of course, also has a medium slow growth rate, so neither of these Pokemon is going to be leveling up differently. Actually, all starter Pokemon have the medium slow growth rate, so they're all on par with each other. However, these Pokemon do not have the same base stats, but their base stats are extremely similar. Venusaur has 80 HP, 82 attack, 83 defense, 100 special attack and special defense, and 80 speed. So I don't know if you've spotted it, but there is only one change between these Pokemon's stats, and that's the fact that Venusaur has swapped defense and special attack with Meganium. Meganium has 100 defense and 83 special attack, and Venusaur just has it the other way around, which in my opinion is the much better stat distribution for a grass-type starter. Additionally, Venusaur also has the poison type, which Meganium lacks, and I think that this might actually be a benefit in this challenge. It seems weird saying that because in Kanto, the poison type is usually viewed quite poorly, unless you look at the S tier in my yellow version tier list. Maybe the poison type is just always a good secondary typing. However, today Venusaur is not going to be using it offensively, because if we look at its Generation 2 move pool, it learns no damage dealing poison type moves through level up or through TM, and this is in a game where Sludge Bomb is a TM. Like, why doesn't Venusaur learn this move? When I made a poll asking who you thought would beat the game faster, so many people said that Venusaur's access to Sludge Bomb was going to be critical for it, and yeah, it doesn't get that move. I'm very disappointed. Also, it starts with a much worse moveset: Tackle, Growl, Leech Seed, and Vine Whip. Obviously, Vine Whip is not as good as Razor Leaf. Why does this move have 10 PP when Razor Leaf has 25? I just don't get it. Also, Vine Whip does not have an increased critical hit ratio, so it's just a normal damage dealing move with 35 base power. Through level up, Venusaur also gets access to Poison Powder, but more importantly, at the same level, it can learn Sleep Powder, one of my favorite moves. After that, at level 22, it gets Razor Leaf, then Sweet Scent, Growth, Synthesis, and Solar Beam. Through TMs and HMs, Venusaur unfortunately does not get as much diversity. It gets Headbutt and Return, like Meganium, as well as Sunny Day, Giga Drain, and Solar Beam, but it doesn't get Earthquake. However, it still does get Mud Slap, so Gligar can continue being sad. So now let's see how much time Venusaur invests in Sprout Tower. It's at 5 minutes and 42 seconds when I start heading towards the building, and then after defeating all the sages and exiting the building with an escape rope, my time is 7 minutes and 5 seconds. So Venusaur took roughly the same amount of time. This was 1 minute and 29 seconds of extra training. Alright, so with Venusaur it is obviously just as easy to crush my way through the trainers in Faulkner's gym, and now let's take on the first gym leader. Alright, so in Generation 2, the AI does not pick moves in the same way that it does in Generation 1. I think they realized their mistakes with coding the system to be based on type effectiveness. So the way the Generation 2 games determine which move to use is they test to see how much damage each move will do, and then pick the one that is doing the most damage. So in this case, the fact that I am a poison type is not going to make Falkner use Mud Slap. He is instead just going to spam Tackle with the Pidgey, and that gives me an easy defeat on his first Pokemon. Here, Venusaur levels up to level 15, where I can learn Poison Powder, but more importantly, immediately after that, I can also learn Sleep Powder, which I'm going to teach Venusaur in the place of Poison Powder. That move did not last very long. Pidgeotto is next, and while I don't have Reflect on my side or an increased chance for critical hits, this thing is still doing almost no damage, even when it gets a critical hit with Gust, and I managed to knock it out over 3 turns. So the Zephyr Badge gives me a 12.5% boost to my attack stat, as well as a useless 12.5% boost to flying type moves. Obviously neither of these Pokemon are going to utilize that, unless Hidden Power Flying becomes useful in a second playthrough. Remember, Hidden Power is banned for my first playthroughs, just to keep things interesting. Also, this badge provides TM31, which is Mud Slap, and I'm going to teach this to Meganium right away in the place of Poison Powder. Now, let's quickly compare these splits to see which Pokemon is in the lead. Meganium beat Falkner with a time of 8 minutes and 9 seconds, whereas Venusaur beat Falkner with a time of 8 minutes and 12 seconds. So Meganium is in the lead, but only by 3 seconds. Honestly, starting out with Razor Leaf, I thought that it would have had a much larger advantage in the early game. However, maybe it's going to earn that advantage in the next small section of the game. Now, one advantage that both grass starters have in Generation 2 is that immediately after you beat Falkner, you can talk to this guy, and he will give you the Miracle Seed to boost the power of grass-type moves. Obviously, for Meganium, this is great because a boost to Razor Leaf's damage is going to do wonders. Now let's head into Union Cave, and here I'm going to fight some trainers that normally I don't battle. That's specifically because usually they waste time, but in this case I want as much experience as is possible with Meganium because Bugsy is coming up next. The lack of the poison type means that his Fury Cutter is going to be doing super effective damage to me, and that really worries me. However, luckily for me, there are 2 hikers in here, as well as 1 Pokemaniac who has a Slowpoke, so that's decently fast experience for Meganium. I also take on the Fire Breather at the end of the cave. He has a single Vulpix, but Mudslap just one-shots this thing. It's at such a low level anyways. Outside of the cave, I battle Hiker Anthony, and with that, I am ready for the Rocket plotline. Defeating all of the trainers here brings Meganium up to level 20 over a damage rounding threshold, and then I can head into the gym, battling some of the trainers, and now I'm level 21 before taking on Bugsy. Due to type effectiveness, the best move against the Kakuna and the Scyther is going to be Tackle, which is quite annoying. I made a mistake here and I was just using Tackle against the Metapod, but this thing can't really do anything anyways. I finish it off, and now it's time for his second Pokemon. The major worry here is that it'll use Poison Sting and Poison Me, which will add to the damage that Scyther can do with Fury Cutter. However, I get lucky and finish it off without being poisoned. Okay, now it's time for Bugsy's ace. In order to minimize damage done, I set up Reflect on the first turn, and then I use Tackle, and oh no, this is doing like maybe a fifth? Like, it's definitely under a quarter. However, then Scyther misses a Fury Cutter. Now, this was critical. Watch how much damage its Fury Cutter does right after I take Scyther down to red health, because I would have been KO'd if it hit one more time. However, because of that early miss, I am able to finish Bugsy's ace off and take a first attempt victory. So that is a 15 minute and 4 second split for the grass dinosaur. And while this is really convenient for me right now, it does leave a significant problem to be solved in my second playthrough. However, for now, let's not deal with that. I'm going to move on to the rival in Azalea Town. Up first is Ghastly. I can use Mud Slap to knock it out, and I take it out over 2 hits. Luckily, this thing doesn't have Curse yet. Next is Zubat. I accidentally go for Razor Leaf here once, doing very little damage. And then I have to knock it out over 2 turns with Tackle. Last is Quilava. Mud Slap is super effective, and while it does slightly less effective power than Razor Leaf, I want to use it just to lower the Quilava's accuracy. I figured that I was going to have to 3-hit anyways. So with the rival out of the way, let's proceed into the forest. In here, I pick up the TM for Headbutt, which I actually don't teach to Meganium right away. I knew that it was going to learn Synthesis very soon, and I put this in the place of Tackle. Very often it's the case that I want to hold on to Mud Slap as long as possible. Obviously, Razor Leaf is great, and I wasn't sure if I should keep Reflect, but in the end I decided not to and teach Headbutt in its place. So in Goldenrod, I do my typical errands. I pick up an Abra after grabbing the coin case in the underground, and then I grab Kenya, heading north to talk to Floria, and with that out of the way, I can head into Whitney's gym and take on the third gym leader. Up first is Clefairy. We're hoping that Metronome doesn't get an amazing roll. In this case, he uses Body Slam, which would have been bad if it paralyzed me, but it didn't, so I finish her lead off and move on to the Miltank. First turn, Razor Leaf misses. It starts to roll. Second turn, Razor Leaf hits, doing half. Rollout isn't gaining power particularly quickly, but my next Razor Leaf does not get the KO. However, Miltank just isn't strong enough, and I finish Whitney off on my first attempt. So for Meganium, that is a 20-minute and 44-second Whitney split. Will Venusaur be able to catch up? Well, let's find out. In the Rocket plotline in Slowpoke Well, Venusaur is level 19, and I really didn't want to backtrack here by the way, so I only have 3 tackles left over going into the battle against this Grunt's Coughing. It's level 14 and it has decent defense stats. I figured that I would be able to knock it out with 3 hits, but then my first tackle just misses. Then my second one misses. So that's really annoying. My third one does hit and it only does about a quarter. So yeah, that's Venusaur's first reset. I am so sorry about that. A lot of times when people watch these challenges, they say they get frustrated with me making mistakes, and believe me, your frustration that you experience while watching these videos is nothing when compared to the frustration that I experience having to play it and then look at the footage, record voiceover, and then edit the video, and then read all the comments about every single mistake I made. Moments like this do haunt me. Also here, while I beat the Coughing, I'm just going to mention the fact that my Venusaur has a 4-character nickname and my Meganium has a 1-character nickname. I really try to make sure that they have the same number of characters in their nicknames so that the text takes the same amount of time to scroll. However, in this case, when I recorded the playthroughs, I just forgot, so whoops. In the end, these are first playthroughs. I'm going to do second playthroughs to correct all my mistakes and get a more accurate time. Okay, so with the Rockets defeated, I head into Bugsy's gym to take on the second gym leader. For Venusaur, it's essentially the same strategy, spam Tackle. I don't have Reflect in this case, but I do have Sleep Powder in case I want to put the Scyther to sleep for safety. However, the fact that I'm a Poison type means that Fury Cutter is just going to do a lot less damage. Still, I want it to play as safely as possible, so once it starts using it, I break its combo by using Sleep Powder, and then I go back to using Tackle to knock it out. It takes 5 turns, just like Meganium, and with that, Venusaur has clocked in with its second split. This result means that Meganium has now gained some more time. It is 19 seconds ahead after Bugsy. I think that time loss is largely because of the mistake in Slowpoke Well. However, even if I had backtracked to the Pokemon Center to heal, Venusaur probably would have come out of this split at a disadvantage. Now next is the rival, and here I want to mention just how powerful Sleep Powder really is. Whenever Venusaur comes up against a problem that it has to solve, as long as I outspeed, I have a chance of winning. That is, even in some of the worst case scenarios, where, for instance, all of my moves are resisted. I think that this is one of the reasons, as a kid, I fell in love with Sleep Tactics so much. Today they gave me an easy win over the rival's Quilava, and here, Venusaur finally gets to learn Razor Leaf. Of course, the moveset upgrades don't stop because it can also learn Headbutt in the place of Tackle, and with that, I am now ready to face Whitney. I assume that this battle is actually going to be easier than it was with Meganium because Venusaur has higher special attack, meaning it's going to be doing more damage with Razor Leaf, however, still not enough to knock out the Clefairy in one turn. Next is Miltank. I go for Razor Leaf. It does much more than half. Actually, it does enough to get the knockout because of a critical hit. So with that, Venusaur clocks in with a 20-minute and 43-second Whitney split. This is 1 second faster than Meganium. Okay, so this race is incredibly close. However, I'm really starting to get worried for the Johto starter because it doesn't really have another advantage until it gets access to Earthquake, but that's available in Victory Road. So I expect throughout the mid-game, Venusaur is likely going to gain a lot of time. Okay, so here while I do all my exploration around Ecruteak City, I'm just going to remind everyone that I'm not allowed to use Hidden Power in my first playthroughs. This is so we get to see how the Pokemon fares with its natural moveset. reset. After all, it's quite hard to get the hidden power that you want with the power that you want in a regular playthrough, and also, the move in general just solves pretty much any problem that you have. I like to go back in and then on my second playthrough, know which problems I'm trying to solve and then pick my hidden power more intelligently. The consequence of this for the first run is that it's going to make Morty much harder. Without a move like Hidden Power Ground, I only have grass type moves to defeat his poison type ghosts, and that's going to be quite annoying. As a result, I'm going to need to do some training in the mid-game, and I do this by heading to Olivine City to defeat all the trainers in the Lighthouse. This brings Venusaur up to level 29, before I use Abra to teleport back to Ekritique City and take on the rival in Burned Tower. Against Haunter, I want to prevent it from using Curse, so I go for Sleep Powder on the first turn, and then I use Razor Leaf twice, it wakes up and uses Curse, knocking itself out. Next is Quilava. I decide to go for Headbutt in case it flinches. In this case, it doesn't, and then the fire type uses Smokescreen. Then against Magnemite, Razor Leaf misses, it hits Supersonic, Razor Leaf misses again, I'm taking more curse damage, Venusaur hits itself, and that's my second reset. Okay, so what I should have done was put the Quilava to sleep and then knock it out with 2 uses of Headbutt so that it can't use Smokescreen against me. By doing this, I'm able to make it to the Magnemite and knock it out with 2 uses of Razor Leaf. All that's left is Zubat, but it's pretty weak, so Headbutt finishes it off in a single turn. Alright, so with that battle out of the way, Morty is coming up next, and I need a better move to face him with. So I'm going to teach Mud Slap in the place of Fury Cutter. I'm hoping that this is going to be enough to defeat him, so let's see. His first 2 Pokemon both know Curse, and when you're doing a solo challenge, it is very important to try and knock them out in one hit without being inflicted by this status condition. I figured that Mudslap would do enough to knock the Ghastly out, and I wanted to not use Sleep Powder just in case it missed. However, unfortunately my mental estimation wasn't good enough. Ghastly survives and puts a curse on Venusaur. Okay, things just got a lot worse. Against the Haunter, I have to knock it out in 2 turns. Sleep Powder is just going to make this take longer, so I don't want to go for it. And by the time I'm moving on to the Gengar, I only have just over half health remaining. Plus, when I go for Mud Slap, it does less than half. Gengar puts Venusaur to sleep with Hypnosis, it eats its Mint Berry, curing the status condition. I attempted to try Razor Leaf in the hopes of getting a crit, but I don't get it on either of the next 2 turns, and as a result, Curse damage ends the battle. Okay, so instead of trying this again, I think I need to do a bunch of training. I'm going to fight trainers in the surrounding areas to take Venusaur up from level 31 all the way to level 35. This is over 2 more damage rounding thresholds, and this way Mudslap is going to knock out the first Ghastly in a single hit. Next is Haunter, I go for Mudslap again. I'm fine getting cursed here just because it's the second Pokemon. However, Haunter just goes for Nightshade and I knock it out. So I should have this now, as long as Mudslap is going to be a 3-hit. And with my new level, it definitely is going to be. Gengar fails a Hypnosis, its second one hits, but the Mint Berry prevents me from being asleep. And with that, I'm able to clean up Morty's final Haunter and earn myself the Fog Badge. I have to say that battle was quite challenging for Venusaur. It gets a time of 34 minutes and 10 seconds here. Now, let's see how Meganium is going to do in this section of the game, because I think it also has a similar problem, which is, what am I going to do against Morty? In the effort of fairness, I'll just mention that I played both of these playthroughs very similarly, so I didn't try to overlevel with one Pokemon. So you'd think here that I have the information from the Venusaur Morty fight that I can use with Meganium, but I'm going to choose not to do that. Instead, I only beat the trainers on Route 39, and at level 30, I head back to Burned Tower to face the rival. He sends out Haunter first, and immediately I have a problem with Meganium. I can't put this thing to sleep and avoid Curse. However, it just uses Lick. Like, I don't know why. It usually always goes for Curse, so I finish it off on the next turn and I don't have a status condition. Next is Zubat. Headbutt gets a critical hit, knocking it out, and now it's time for the Quilava. Here I'll use Mudslap to lower its accuracy, and also, its Embers are not doing very much to me because I have fantastic special defense. Last is Magnemite. Mudslap does 4 times damage, and with that, the rival is no more. Alright, that was a nice battle. Now, let's move on to Morty. Okay, so I expect this one is going to be more challenging. I do not have Sleep Powder, can't utilize that strategy at all. Also, I do not one-hit the first Ghastly as was the case with Venusaur previously, so it puts a curse on Meganium. So we'll get a comparable result between these first 2 battles. However, here's the thing that I realized as I knocked the Haunter out. If Curse does 25% damage per turn, and Synthesis heals 50%, then as long as Morty isn't able to put me to sleep, it doesn't actually matter because I can heal up. You can see that here against the Gengar. After I consume my Mint Berry, I just heal with Synthesis, taking me back to full health, and then I continue to use Mud Slap. By doing this, the Gengar is less and less likely to hit Hypnosis, it misses its second one, and I finish it off. Now, normally if I was cursed, I would be worried about the Haunter taking me out with passive damage, but that isn't the case here because I can heal with Synthesis. And as a result, I am able to finish off Morty on my first attempt, staying at level 32. Now this gives Meganium a major advantage. It is now 6 minutes and 33 seconds ahead of Venusaur. I cannot state how much of an advantage this is, and it was won by access to the move Synthesis. As I move on to the next section of the game around Olivine City, I do just want to make sure to note the fact that with Venusaur, I probably didn't need to level up. What I could have done instead was use Sleep Powder to get through the battle with less resets. While it is a more luck-based strategy, I think that it would have yielded a better time for the Kanto starter. Okay, so now let's head into Chuck's gym, and this is going to be a battle that I think is going to be very easy to win for both of these Pokemon. After all, his lead is a Primeape. It is not known for being particularly strong. Like, has anyone ever struggled against his Primeape? I don't think so. The Pokemon he's known for is Poliwrath with Hypnosis and Mind Reader and Dynamic Punch. This thing is actually quite good. However, not today because I have Razor Leaf and I get a critical hit, knocking it out in one turn. So with that, Meganium has earned itself the 5th badge. This gives me access to Fly, and that allows me to backtrack to New Bark Town and then head out onto the route where I can pick up the Pink Bow. This is only available after you defeat Faulkner. After that, I head to Violet City collecting a rare candy, then I surf south of Goldenrod City to grab a nugget and a rare candy, as well as to access this little hidden area and obtain the soft sand. Then I head to the Lake of Rage where I grab one more rare candy before defeating the red Gyarados. By this point in the playthrough, Meganium has learned Body Slam, and this move is a very good middle step between Headbutt and then later on Return. Lance beats a guy up with his Dragonite. After that, I head into the Rocket headquarters. This area is all very easy. We are going to spend no time discussing it. So now we are going to face Price. He is also not deserving of an intro because of course he has a Seal and a Dugong, which are both water Pokemon. Then he has a Piloswine, which is a ground type Pokemon. That means that all of his team members are weak to grass Pokemon. I always found it really weird that ice does not resist grass. I think if I could make one change to the ice type, I would give it a resistance to grass. I just think that makes sense. Anyways, in this case, I easily defeat Price and earn myself the Glacier badge. With it comes a 12.5% boost to my special attack stat, which is really nice for a grass-type Pokemon to have. And now, with all of that out of the way, it is time to take on what is typically one of the hardest gym leaders in all of Johto. Let's face Jasmine. I've kept Mud Slap on my set just so that I can use it to defeat both of her Magnemites. Luckily, it gets a one-hit, and then she sends in Steelix. Now, this thing is a ground type. I accidentally used Mud Slap on it. Whoops, that's just a mistake. It hits Iron Tail, which does very little. And then I use Razor Leaf, and I thought that this was going to knock it out, because Steelix is not known for its special defense, but it doesn't do that much. Then Steelix hits another Iron Tail, which is surprising just because it didn't miss. And this one gets a crit, doing a lot to Meganium. Jasmine uses a Hyper Potion. My next Razor Leaf does half. However, I'm outspeeding, so it doesn't get another hit in, and I knock it out. All that's left is one more Magnemite, and once again, Mud Slap gets the knockout. So Meganium has earned itself the 7th badge, and with it, a 12.5% boost to its defense stat. And with how well Meganium performed in that section of the game, I am wondering if Venusaur has any chance to catch up. While Chuck is completely trivial, here Venusaur also gets a critical hit with Razor Leaf, knocking the Poliwrath out in a single hit. There isn't much wiggle room to gain back time from here on out. After all, I'm going to collect all the same items. Just before I get to the Pink Bow, I thought that I forgot a Repel, but I didn't. I actually just ran into Entei here, which is kind of fun. By the way, every time I run into one of these roaming legendaries, I do throw a Pokeball at it. I know it's not very scientific, but maybe one day I'll catch one and that'll be pretty exciting. So now let's skip ahead to Price. This is once again trivial. A series of 3 one-hits actually. And then after that, I take on Jasmine. Because these Pokemon have the same base attack stat, this is also going to be trivial. However, I want to talk about this fight because after I defeat the first Magnemite, Venusaur levels up to level 41 where it can learn Growth. and this is a move that really defines it because Meganium doesn't have access to it. In this case, I choose to teach it in the place of Headbutt because normal type moves are not that useful when I can get a power boost for Razor Leaf. Also, I need the Mud Slap later on to knock out the second Magnemite. I finish the Steelix off with 2 Razor Leafs, and then I polish off her final Pokemon and earn myself the 7th badge. Coming out of that split, I was actually surprised to find out that Venusaur has gained back a lot of time. It is only 2 minutes and 52 seconds behind now. If you're wondering the order that I played these 2 playthroughs in, I played Venusaur first, and then in the afternoon I played Meganium, so the time that Venusaur has gained back through the mid-game is just because it's one-shotting more Pokemon. During the radio tower part of the plotline, both Pokemon will get access to Return, which in this case I teach in the place of Mud Slap, and then I have to face Petrol. And this guy, I gotta talk about him. I had Serena draw this awesome art for his team. There is no place to put it on screen while I'm fighting him, so I'm just gonna show it to you before the battle. I love how much character and personality each one of the Coughing have. This is really awesome. Alright, so now let's go into the battle against him. What I need here is 1-hits on the Coughing so I can avoid Self-Destruct, Sludge, and Smokescreen. Luckily for Venusaur, one of the main flaws of this battle, which is getting poisoned by Sludge, is not a possibility. Also, Return is able to get 1-hits, so he is trivial today. In the underground, I go up against the rival. Now, as of late, I have learned to respect this guy. I had one very embarrassing reset against him in my Lugia playthrough, so go check out that stream highlight video if you haven't seen it already. And then here, I fail to knock out the Golbat. It confuses me. I hit myself a lot. It hits Wing Attack, takes me down to 9 hit points. And then I have to make a choice. I don't think I'm going to get through the rest of his team without setting up Growth. So maybe if I max that out, I'll be able to sweep with 1-hits and survive. However, in the end, Golbat wakes up and finishes Venusaur off. That's another reset where if I had access to Synthesis, I would have survived. I could have just put the Golbat to sleep and healed up. However, in this case, Venusaur is punished for not having access to Recovery. Luckily though, the rival's not that good, so I do defeat him on my next attempt. Now, after completing the underground is typically when I buy vitamins in these playthroughs. After all, to get out of the underground, you have to use the elevator anyways, so it seems like a convenient time to put this into any of my playthroughs. Now, with money in Generation 2, you actually have to make a choice. If you spend all your money right now on vitamins, then you won't have enough to buy a move from the Move Tutor, but today both of the grass starters can't learn any of the Move Tutor moves, so I can just buy vitamins here with all of my money. Return gives me an easy sweep against the final Rockets team, even though technically he should be good against me, but he's no problem today. After that, I pick up the TM for Sunny Day, the radio card so I don't get stuck in Kanto. By the way, when I was first learning Johto, that happened way too much. It was always really annoying. After that, I head into Ice Path, solve some fun little sliding puzzles, pick up the HM for Waterfall, the TM for Rest, and then I head into Claire's gym. Because I'm not allowed to use Hidden Power in my first playthrough, I don't have a super effective move against any of her Pokemon. What I'm hoping for is the fact that Return is going to do enough damage to one-shot all of the Dragonairs. I take the first one down, let's hope that it isn't a roll. I use Return on the second one, and it also goes down. Alright, so this is looking like consistent 1-hits. She sends out her third Dragonair, and once again, I get the 1-hit. All that's left is Kingdra, but this thing doesn't really have any moves that are good against Venusaur. I go for Return, and surprisingly I get a 1-hit? That was a lucky crit. And with that, Venusaur has defeated all of the gym leaders in Johto. I mentioned before that Meganium's Learn set is overall better than Venusaur's in these games. However, I do think that it's worth noting that it doesn't get access to Earthquake until quite late into the game, and that does mean that I have to face Petrol with basically nothing that's good against his Pokemon. Now, notably with Venusaur, I picked up Return a little bit earlier, but I thought with Meganium, Body Slam would be enough. However, it doesn't one-shot the first Coughing, which is unfortunate. I get hit by Sludge. Luckily, it does not poison me, and I finish the Coughing off on the second turn. I was really hoping that it was a roll to knock these things out, but it's not, so the second one goes down over 2 turns once again. Well, I guess it actually is a roll because the third one gets knocked out in a single hit, and then he sends in his ace, Wheezing. I get a critical hit against it, taking it to red. It goes for Sludge, which poisons Meganium, and then I finish it off. Okay, getting poisoned this late into the fight isn't the worst thing in the world because I should be able to knock out 2 Coughing. However, I fail to knock the first one out. I do get Paralysis, but it still hits Sludge, and with poison damage, Meganium now only has 24 hit points. Here's the thing though, poison doesn't do that much damage every turn and I can just use synthesis to heal. Because of that, I'm able to finish off his final 2 Pokemon and move on with the playthrough. So now let's head into the underground and face the rival. The Golbat doesn't go down in a single hit, he uses Confuse Ray, Meganium hits itself, not once, but twice, and then I snap out of confusion and knock his lead out. Next is Quilava. I didn't think that Body Slam was going to one-hit here, so Mud Slap on the first turn lowers its accuracy, then I just decided to finish it off with this move. It's only going to take 2 more turns, plus I'm tanking the Flame Wheels really well. I take my time, healing with Synthesis, and then I knock it out. Next is Magnemite. Mudslap does 4 times damage and takes it out in a single hit. Because I use Turbo Fire keys for these playthroughs, I sometimes spam A little bit too quickly, and in this case I once again use Mudslap against the Haunter. This would have allowed it to use Curse against me, but it just goes for Mean Look and I finish it off. Okay, all that's left is Sneasel, and while it looks cool, it's not a very good Pokemon in these games, so I finish off the rival battle. Okay, so with the Rocket plotline out of the way, there's a lot of stuff that I do that is very similar to Venusaur. I pick up the vitamins, grab Sunny Day, and now I'm ready to face Claire. Because Venusaur and Meganium have the same base attack stat, Claire is going to be essentially identical. I can one-shot all of her Dragonairs with Return, and then once I get to Kingdra, I'm going to knock it out over 2 turns, well, 3 in this case, just because she used a Hyper Potion. And with that, both of these Pokemon have the ability to head towards the League. However, I'm going to make a couple stops first to pick up rare candies. And the first is in Whirl Islands. You'll note that of course in this playthrough I have used Flash. Do remember that for my second playthrough in this video, I am not going to be using that move, so we're going to save some time there. I also stopped by Mount Mortar, which isn't dark, in Crystal version to grab a rare candy, and then I pick up one more rare candy just before Tojo falls. With that out of the way, I grab the TM for Solar Beam, and then I head towards Victory Road. Here, I have to do one more battle against the rival, and this fight is completely trivial for Venusaur because the rival leads with Sneasel. Not a very good Pokemon to start with. I can just put it to sleep. I'm not scared if it wakes up because it has terrible moves. I can set up Growth, and after that, I sweep easily with Razor Leaf. Even one-shotting Pokemon like the Typhlosion as well as the Magneton. Now for Meganium, before I do this fight, I am going to make sure to explore Victory Road so that I pick up the TM for Earthquake. With this powerful ground type coverage, the rival battle actually ends up being slightly faster for Meganium just because I don't have to spend time setting up or time healing because I one-shot all of his team members. Meganium finishes this fight with a time of 1 hour and 47 seconds. So Meganium has a 3-minute lead over Venusaur at this point in the playthrough, so it might actually be able to do it on this first attempt. However, the League is up next, so let's get into it. Up first is Will. Of course, Return is the best option here. It one-shots his first Xatu. Next, he sends in Jinx, and this thing is very physically frail. It has 43 defense, so I knock it out in 1 turn as well. Next is Executor. This thing is the bulkiest member of his team that I've fought so far, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to 2-hit, and that ends up being the case. It hits me with Psychic once, doing about a quarter, and then I move on to his ace, Xatu. Because this thing is 2 levels higher, it takes less damage from Return and survives. It confuses Meganium. Will uses a max potion. I hit myself in confusion twice. It hits Psychic. My next Return doesn't get the knockout. It gets a critical hit with a follow-up Psychic. And now things are looking quite bad, so I'm going to use Synthesis to try to heal. However, I'm still confused. I need Meganium not to hit itself. Unfortunately though, it does. And as a result, Meganium gets its first reset here against Will. Here's the thing though, that loss was entirely human error. If I had just used Synthesis instead of Return, I would have healed and been able to knock out his ace. So that's what I do in the next fight, and as a result, I make it to his final Pokemon, Slowbro. I have lots of options against this thing. Razor Leaf is pretty good. Once it sets up Amnesia though, I use Return instead, and this gets a critical hit, finishing Will off. Okay, so it's time for Koga. Up first is Ariados. The thing is usually very weak. I was quite surprised when Return did not get the 1-hit. With its first move, it sets up Double Team, and then it takes me a baffling amount of time to knock it out. But luckily, it can't do anything to me along the way because its only damage-dealing move is Giga Drain. Next is Venomoth. As a poison type, this thing is quite scary for Meganium to face. Once again, Return does not get the one hit, and Venomoth uses Toxic, badly poisoning Meganium. I want to just take a moment and briefly explain how this mechanic works. Every turn you're poisoned, the damage that it deals to you is doubled, so while regular poison doesn't really feel like a timer, bad poison really does. It's also worth noting that Koga's AI knows when you're badly poisoned, and in these cases he is going to prioritize moves like Double Team to try and stall you out. This is what happens against the Crobat. It sets up Double Team on the first turn, then he uses a full restore, Return misses, I take poison damage, Return misses again, poison damage starts to stack up, Crobat hits with Wing Attack, I miss a third return and a fourth return, and with that I get my second reset. Honestly, that was extremely bad luck. There is no way I'm going to miss that many returns against the Crobat. After all, once it sets up one Double Team, I have a 75% chance to hit. Like, I really shouldn't have missed 4 returns in a row. And this time, I don't. I make it to his Fortress, and I can use Earthquake to knock it out over 3 turns. And now it's time for our favorite Generation 2 exclusive trainer, Bruno. This guy obviously doesn't exist in Generation 1. At this point, it is starting to feel like the momentum that Meganium had throughout the early and mid-game is starting to really fall off. I'm not able to one-hit the Hitmontop or the Hitmonchan, so I take some chip damage in the process. Luckily, the Hitmonlee does go down to a single hit. Next, he chooses to send in Machamp, and this thing can do a lot of damage with Cross Chop. Return doesn't one-hit, it uses Cross Chop, getting a critical hit. However, Meganium hangs on. I decided to use Synthesis here, which I objectively think is a misplay. I should have just knocked the Machamp out and then one-shot the Onix with Razor Leaf. Still, I'm able to take the victory on my first attempt. And that is a scenario that usually does not play out against Karen, who is next. The reason that this fight always feels so hard is that the Umbreon has a high chance of using Sand Attack on the first turn. The matter is complicated by the fact that you can almost never one-shot it. Today, with the amount of damage my Return did, it's going to be a 3-hit. Well, unless Meganium gets a critical hit. So now let's move on to our second Pokemon, which is also the second complication for this fight, because the Vileplume loves to use Stun Spore to paralyze you. That's specifically why I have the Paralyzed Cure Berry, because I know I'm not going to one-shot this thing. As a result, I'm able to heal myself and finish it off on the next turn, moving on to her ace, Houndoom. Luckily for me, this thing isn't fast enough to move first, so I hit Earthquake and knock it out with a single hit. From here, things should be easier as long as Sand Attack doesn't mess me up. Okay, it messes me up immediately against the Gengar because I miss Earthquake. Gengar uses Curse, and now I'm on a timer. Unfortunately for me, I miss a second Earthquake on the next turn. It seems like missing moves is the theme for Meganium, and then Gengar uses Lick, which paralyzes me. I don't have my berry this time, so it looks like I'm now going to be slower than the Ghost, which is worrying when it knows the move Destiny Bond. However, it doesn't go for it. This time Earthquake connects, and I knock it out. All that's left is Murkrow. This thing doesn't know a flying type attack, so I'm able to just one-shot it with Return. And with that, Meganium has made it to the champion. However, before we do that, let's go back and see how Venusaur is going to do throughout the league. So did you think Will was bad with Meganium? Well, Will is much worse with Venusaur. Return is not able to one-shot the first Xatu. It confuses me, I hit myself so much. And here, Venusaur's poison typing is a disadvantage because Psychic does so much more damage. As a result of confusion plus Psychic, Venusaur ends up losing in the first battle. I figured that with Venusaur's moveset, it shouldn't have too many problems here. After all, Sleep is really good, I can set up with Growth, and then I should be able to sweep. However, in Generation 2, they redesigned Sleep so that the opponent's Pokemon attacks when it wakes up, and as a result, I am not going to be able to set up for free against Will, and I take my second reset. And believe me, it is not just 2 resets against Will. Once again, for a third time, the first Xatu finishes me off. This is getting really old. In the next fight, I get lucky for the first time, and I'm able to knock out his lead Pokemon. From there, I finish the Jinx off in one hit, and then Will sends in his second Xatu. I put it to sleep immediately, and then use Return, taking it down to red health. Xatu wakes up, hits Psychic, doing about a third, and Will heals it with a max potion. My return takes it back to red health, and because I'm faster, I get one more hit in, finishing his ace off. So it looks like this is going to be a victory. However, we're not through the woods yet because the Executor actually has the highest special attack stat on his entire team. What I'm banking on here is that it's going to try and set up with like Reflect on the first turn. It does, but that prevents return from knocking out, and it hits an absolutely massive Psychic, taking me down to orange health. I finish it on the next turn, and now all that's left is Slowbro. Okay, this thing is going to set up. It always uses Amnesia, so I'm going to go for Razor Leaf and hopefully just get a crit right away. And in this case, I don't get a crit, but I do enough damage to finish it off. Venusaur has finally cleared Will. That was way harder than I expected. Now against Koga, I am going to feel the lack of Earthquake. However, even if Venusaur could learn it, I don't know if I would want to teach it, just because its current moveset is so powerful. Sometimes in these solo challenges, you'll see me hang on to a moveset like this way too long, and the reason is that it's very flexible. You don't have to overlevel to get through tricky opponents if you have a setup move in combination with a sleep move. Also, it's worth noting that in Generation 2 there is no move reminder, so if I delete either Sleep Powder or Growth, I will not be able to relearn it. In general, I actually think that this constraint makes solo challenges more interesting, and if I could make one change in Generation 3, I would probably just remove the move reminder, and that way the challenges would get a lot more difficult. However, I'm not sure that's the best idea. After all, Emerald is quite challenging as it is. Okay, so now let's talk about what I was doing for the Koga fight. I set up with Growth until I had +6, and then from there I can use a combination of Razor Leaf or Return. In this case, I'm using Return against the Crobat because he used Double Team. It gives me a little bit more accuracy. I'm able to finish it off. And then against the Fortress, I use Razor Leaf to take it out. It has much lower special defense than it has physical defense. And after that, all that's left is Muck. This thing has lower physical defense than special defense, so I go for Return and knock it out over 2 turns. Bruno is next. For this fight, I knew that I could set up at the beginning because the Hitmontop is quite bad. However, I didn't want to overdo it with setup, so I only go to +2 and then I start my sweep. From here, Razor Leaf sweeps through all of the Hitmons, and Venusaur levels up and finally has the chance to learn Synthesis. The problem is that my current moveset is very good, and I don't want to lose any of these moves, so I'm going to say no to this recovery move. I really hope that that isn't going to be a mistake. Next, Bruno sends in Machamp, but with setup, Razor Leaf gets the one hit, and obviously, Onix is easy to finish off. Okay, so Karen is up next. I expect to have at least one reset here. She always messes with me. Of course, Sleep Powder misses on the first turn, allowing Umbreon to lower my accuracy with Sand Attack. And from there, things just get worse and worse. I keep trying to put it to sleep because I wanted to set up with Sleep Powder. However, in the end, this ends up not being a good choice because I just get whittled away at by the Umbreon until I finally just decide to use Return and Razor Leaf to knock it out. Next, she sends in Houndoom. I'm not liking my odds here because I have red health. Luckily, Sleep Powder works, and then I get 3 returns in, knocking it out even though she used a max potion. Okay, so now it's time for the Vileplume. Unfortunately, Return does not one-hit. This thing knows Acid, and Venusaur goes down. So everyone told me that Johto is not very kind to grass types, and I think that I am learning why. In the next battle, I get much luckier against the Umbreon, and I prevent it from using Sand Attack, moving on to the Houndoom with my accuracy intact. However, even with this, Sleep Powder misses. Houndoom goes for Flamethrower, which actually doesn't do that much damage, however, it burns me. Are you kidding me? So now, when I put this thing to sleep, it wastes time because I am on a timer. Luckily, I crit the Houndoom, knocking it out with a single return. Next is Vileplume. In this case, Venusaur is not going to get paralyzed by it because it's already burned. Instead, it goes for Petal Dance, which does so little to me, but I don't really think Acid would have done much more. Still, this chip damage in combination with Burn does enough to me, and Venusaur faints once again. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my first strategy, put the Umbreon to sleep, set up with Growth. In this case, I managed to get all the way to +6 without having my accuracy lowered. This way, I am now able to one-shot the Umbreon with Razor Leaf, and I think that my special attack stat is high enough that Razor Leaf will be able to knock the Houndoom out. However, it doesn't. I get hit by a Flamethrower, taking me under half health, and then she uses a max potion, allowing me to knock her ace out. Alright, time for the Vileplume. I do not want to get statused here, so I'm going to put it to sleep, and then finish it off with 2 uses of return. Well, it would have been 2, but I got a critical hit. Time for Gengar. I'm really realizing here that grass moves are just not very good against her team. I miss my Sleep Powder, it uses Curse, and then I finish it off with Razor Leaf. Now all that's left is Murkrow. I go for return, knocking it out in a single hit, and finally, Venusaur has made it to the champion. However, before we jump into that fight, let's compare the splits after Karen. Venusaur has a time of 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 31 seconds, whereas Meganium has a time of 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 6 seconds. It is currently 5 minutes and 25 seconds ahead. So now, let's head into the Lance fight and see if Venusaur is going to lose any more time here. First is Gyarados. I wanted to see how much Razor Leaf was going to do. It's not that much. So I'm going to set up once with Growth, and then that'll hopefully give me a 2-shot with Razor Leaf. Unfortunately, it doesn't. The Gyarados just barely survives. I set up one more time with Growth. This will give me slightly better damage against the Aerodactyl later in the fight, and then I finish off his lead. Alright, so it is time for the Dragonites. Notably here, he is going to send out his second Dragonite first. That's because it has Blizzard. I'm going to put it to sleep and then use Return to knock it out in what I was hoping would be 2 turns, but it ends up being 3. Next, he sends in Aerodactyl. That's because this Pokemon has a Wing Attack, and you can see that that move is super effective. Now, you might be surprised here that Venusaur is faster than Aerodactyl. Remember, I am getting a badge boost for my speed stat, and I also have stat experience. The opponent has access to neither of these mechanics, so that's why I'm moving first. I polish it off with Razor Leaf, and then Lance sends in Charizard. Against it, I really need to get Sleep Powder. And luckily in this case, I do. I go for Return, it does more than half. Charizard keeps sleeping, and I finish it off. Now he sends in his Ace Dragonite because it has Fire Blast. His first Dragonite is really bad against grass types, that's why he is waiting this long to send it in. Okay, so let's rinse and repeat. I put the Dragonite to sleep, and then I start using Return. It does less than half. Unfortunately, Lance uses a full restore, waking the Dragonite up right away. I put it back to sleep, taking it down to red health with Return, and then on the next turn, I'm faster, so I knock his Ace out. Now, all that's left is the easy Dragonite, and with that, Venusaur clocks in with a time of 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 7 seconds after Lance. So how is this fight going to go with Meganium? Well, here's the thing. The advantages that Meganium had up until this point in the playthrough are not particularly helpful against Lance. Earthquake is great coverage, but when all of the opponent's Pokemon are the flying type, Earthquake is not very good. Razor Leaf is also not very good because I don't have the added benefit of having Growth to set up. Synthesis can be powerful, however, the first Gyarados loves to set up Rain Dance, which is going to cut the effectiveness of this move in half. So what I really have to rely on here is Return once I defeat the Gyarados. I go for it against the first Dragonite and it does less than half. I am very worried now. Dragonite misses Thunder Wave because the AI has a 25% debuff on all of its non-damage dealing moves in Generation 2, and then I roll better damage with Return, finishing Lance's second Dragonite off. Next is Aerodactyl. I figured that Razor Leaf was the better choice here, and it does less than half to the rock flying type. I get hit by Wing Attack, which does about a quarter. Then Razor Leaf misses. I get hit by another Wing Attack, taking me under half. My next Razor Leaf doesn't crit. Aerodactyl survives. It gets a crit, and Meganium goes down. Okay, so coming out of this fight, I was pretty demoralized. I think that Lance is going to be brutal. I am going to try this fight one more time, but after that I think that I'm going to be forced to use rare candies or to black out and do additional training. In this case, blacking out will be such a huge time loss that Meganium is definitely going to lose. So I think in this case, theoretically, rare candies are the better play just to try and keep pace with Venusaur. However, that might end up hurting Meganium in the late game when I have to face Red. Remember, he does have a level 77 Charizard. So I'm partway through the Blizzard Dragonite, and I'm paralyzed. Things are not going well. I'm not using Synthesis here because Rain is active, and as a result, the Dragonite polishes me off. Now I'm going to note here that I wanted to use a Paralyzed Cure Berry, but I checked my bag and I don't actually have one, so that is another complicating factor for Meganium. Obviously, this is just player error, and I will be able to correct it in my second playthrough, but for now, we are stuck in this situation. However, in the next fight, I do more damage with Return because of a good roll. Dragonite misses Thunder Wave, and then I was hoping that my next Return would knock it out, but it doesn't. Dragonite goes for Blizzard, it misses, and I finish it off. Okay, so I've made it back to the Aerodactyl. This feels pretty good. I go for Razor Leaf, it does less than half. I take damage from Wing Attack. I fail to knock the Aerodactyl out on the next turn, and then it crits me for massive damage. Okay, so I think that if I use Synthesis now, I'm going to be able to recover more health than I take damage from Wing Attack, as long as the Aerodactyl doesn't get another critical hit. Obviously in Generation 2, crits are not based on base speed. That means Aerodactyl isn't a critting machine like it is in Generation 1. And as a result, I'm able to heal up to full health and knock it out. Okay, I am really hoping that Meganium's high special defense is going to allow me to take very little damage from the Charizard. I go for Return, doing more than half. It uses Flamethrower, which does less than half to me, and I finish it off. So, I have made it to Lance's Ace Dragonite. I get a lucky crit with Return, taking it under half health. Dragonite just goes for Safeguard, and as a result, I am able to get 2 more returns in, taking it down to red health. It attacks me with Outrage, taking me to orange health. I finish it off, and now Lance only has 1 Pokemon left. I did not think I was going to get here. Because I want to play safe against his last Dragonite that doesn't have very many good moves, I use Synthesis, healing Meganium into green health. Dragonite uses Thunder Wave, paralyzing me, and then I hit with Return, doing half damage to it. The best move Dragonite can use is Hyper Beam. It uses it, and it does so little damage. Okay, I'm feeling confident now. However, then Paralysis activates and I can't move. Dragonite has to recharge. I'm fully paralyzed again. It hits Hyper Beam, and this time it gets a critical hit. And Meganium survives on 1 hit point. This time, I am not paralyzed. I hit Return, and Dragonite goes down. Well, that was a lucky win, and with it, Meganium is now part of the Hall of Fame. By the way, this sprite is, it's kind of weird. Not my favorite. It should come as no surprise to any of you that Kanto is very easy for both of these Pokemon, so let's skip right ahead to the fight against Blue. Up first is Pidgeot, which you would think is going to be a problem. It is a flying type after all, but this bird is real bad. I go for Return, doing over half. It uses Mirror Move, and in Generation 2, the enemy Pokemon have 0 friendship, so yeah, its Return does almost nothing to my Meganium. I recover all the health with leftovers and knock it out on the next turn. Next, Blue chooses to send an Executor. I'm pretty sure his AI is doing this because he wants to set up Sunny Day before the Arcanine, but then once this strange coconut tree thing is on the field, he just decides not to set up Sunny Day, uses Leech Seed, which fails, and then he goes for Solar Beam without the sun, and I knock it out. Okay, time for the Arcanine. Obviously, Earthquake does super effective damage, but it isn't quite enough to get the KO. Arcanine strikes back with Flamethrower, doing more than half to Meganium, but because it didn't burn, I have him on the run, and I am eventually able to take the Fiery Doggo out after he uses 2 full restores. And from here, things are going to get a lot easier. I can use Return to knock the Alakazam out in 1 hit. Gyarados is next, and it takes 3 returns to knock out, and finally, Rhydon goes down to a single Razor Leaf. So Meganium defeats Blue at a time of 1 hour 24 minutes and 8 seconds. Obviously, Venusaur does not struggle throughout any of the Kanto gyms either, and it makes it to Blue. Now, if Growth boosted both Special Attack and Special Defense in Generation 2, I think that I would want to set up this move here, but instead I'm just going to use Sleep Powder and knock Blue's Pokemon out. By the way, something I didn't know is that starting in Generation 4, Growth boosts both Physical Attack and Special Attack, which seems outrageously good. Also, in Harsh Sunlight, it raises both of these stats by 2 stages. However, that's not the case in Generation 2, so even if I had Sunny Day on my side, Growth would still just boost my special attack by 1 stage. Now I think throughout this fight we were just seeing how good Venusaur's strategy is, setting up Sleep Powder and then sweeping with either Return or Razor Leaf, and it has Growth basically just because I know that at the very end of the game, I'm going to have to contend with Red. And of all the trainers in the Generation 2 games, he is undoubtedly the most terrifying, by at least a factor of 2. This guy is so much better than everyone else. So with Blue out of the way, It is time for these two Pokemon to go up against the ultimate Generation 2 challenge. The first thing you'll notice as I go into the fight against Red with Venusaur is that I am now level 73, that's 10 levels higher than I was at the end of the Blue fight. That's because throughout these playthroughs I collect a total of 10 rare candies and I try to save them as long as possible just so I can have the maximum level once I reach Red. Now Venusaur is quite fast, despite what it looks like. I always think that this thing is going to be really slow, but it's very speedy. It moves first against Pikachu and knocks it out in a single hit with Return. This way, Red can't hit me with Charm to lower my attack stat. After all, I'm going to need it later on. Espeon is next, and this thing presents a threat for Venusaur that it doesn't present to Meganium, just because I'm a poison type, so its psychic moves are going to hit really hard. The first turn it sets up Reflect, allowing it to survive my second return and strike back with Psychic. And this does so much damage. In fact, more than half, which is not very promising. Luckily though, I am able to finish it off on the next turn, so it doesn't look like this thing is ever going to get more than one hit in. Next, Red sends in his Snorlax, which is basically his ace in these games. It is by far his strongest Pokemon, and it is the reason that I needed not to have my attack stat lowered by the Pikachu. After all, Snorlax has much less physical defense than it has special defense. I put it to sleep and then I decided to set up Growth because his Pokemon is behind a Reflect still, so Return is not going to do very much damage. While I'm trying to get set up, Snore gets a critical hit, doing a lot of damage, and then I decided that it was probably time to start going for the knockout. I choose Razor Leaf just in case it crits, then Snorlax wakes up, hits Body Slam, and Venusaur faints. Here's the thing though, I can really improve how I do this fight, because against Espeon, I am moving first, so I can just put it to sleep immediately. Then I set up Growth here 4 times and knock it out with Razor Leaf without taking any damage. And now I'm in a much better position for the Snorlax. After putting it to sleep, my high amount of setup allows Razor Leaf to do half, and I finish it off in 2 turns. Okay, so my Cantonian starter only has to go up against Red's Cantonian starters. First he chooses Venusaur. Here I set up Growth one more time, taking me up to +5 before I knock the Venusaur out with an accidental critical hit. I did want to get to +6 from Growth. Okay, so now it is time for the Pokemon I am most scared of. Will Venusaur be able to defeat the Charizard? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. I'm fast enough to move first and use Sleep Powder. Unfortunately, it misses, which is sort of the world punishing me for overusing sleep tactics. And then Charizard hits Flamethrower, which also burns Venusaur, so that's like the worst case scenario. Luckily for me though, I can just keep spamming Sleep Powder. It works, putting Charizard to sleep, and then I tried Return, which does almost no damage. I take damage from Burn. This is getting a little bit scary, so I'm going to use Razor Leaf instead. Unfortunately, it doesn't do very much, and then I take more burn damage. I start using Return again. Doesn't really look like one of these moves is much better. However, I am able to get 2 more hits in, which is enough to finish the Charizard off, and I move on to the Blastoise with orange health remaining. I'm faster, I hit Razor Leaf, and the Blastoise goes down. So Venusaur clocks in with a first playthrough time of 1 hour, 35 minutes, and 12 seconds. It had 10 resets and it finished the game at level 73 with a game time of 5 hours and 48 minutes. Can Meganium beat this time? It's coming out of the battle against Blue with a 6 minute and 18 second time lead. And right now it has under 10 minutes remaining before Venusaur's finish time. So things are looking very good for the Monograss starter. I think despite all of our expectations. I one-shot the Pikachu to avoid Charm, and then Red sends in Venusaur next. Once again here, I think he sends out the Venusaur first so that when he sends in the Charizard, he might have the Sun on his side. In this case, I'm trying to stall the Sun out so that I won't go up against the Charizard and get one hit by Flamethrower. Unfortunately, I don't manage to pull it off, and the Venusaur establishes the Sun right as the Charizard comes out. However, Meganium is faster, it hits with Return, but it doesn't do half. Charizard strikes back with a sun-boosted Flamethrower, and despite my amazing special defense stat, it actually knocks Meganium out. I was very surprised by this, and also a little shook. That really should not have happened. So a major problem of this battle is that the Venusaur also knows Synthesis, and when the Sun is active, this move completely heals the Pokemon. As a result, it is sort of guesswork timing the knockout on the Venusaur to get to the Charizard without the Sun. However, in the next fight, I get a lucky critical hit, and this makes things line up. Okay, so now I need to be able to survive the Charizard's flamethrower. In this case, it hits me again, taking Meganium all the way down to 30 hit points. I was hoping Return might have a better role in it, but it doesn't, and Charizard finishes me off again after surviving my second return. Okay, so I always save and then use my rare candies, so if I need to train additional levels, I can do it very quickly. In this case, I'm going to level up so that Meganium hits level 65, and once I've done that, it's now time to try red again over a damage rounding threshold. I make it back to the Charizard without the sun active, I go for return, and in this case, it's still doing less than half. Charizard hits with Flamethrower, and that finishes Meganium off. Okay, things are not looking good. I decided to try again, but this time trying Curse. If I can boost my attack stage just once, then I'm going to 2-hit the Venusaur and better be able to time when the sun is expiring. This way, the Charizard is going to move first against me, but I know that I will survive a Flamethrower if I'm in green health. Then I can use Return to deal massive damage, and here I get lucky because I get a critical hit knocking it out in one turn. However, then I realize a flaw in my logic. He is not going to send in Snorlax next, he sends in Espeon, which just outspeeds and finishes Meganium off. I have to say that the pressure was starting to mount. Look at the time, we are just crossing the 1 hour and 33 minute mark. This is getting very close. Now, I'll admit here that I was starting to get a little bit stubborn. I was really hoping that maybe I could just crit the Charizard again, but that is really not going to work out. Because we are so close to Venusaur's time, I'm trying to fight again, just hoping for a miracle, but in this case, I don't get it, and as a result, Meganium is not going to defeat the Kanto starter in the first attempt. However, I think that I can use a different strategy to win at level 75. If I use Curse, set up like 3 times, and then use the Quick Claw, eventually I will move first against the Charizard and knock it out. However, then the Charizard burns me, and my return does half damage as a result, and it finishes me off. It's really annoying. I make it back to the Charizard, but this time I have lowish health. It moves first because the Quick Claw doesn't activate, and Flamethrower knocks Meganium out. I make it back to the Charizard with more health. This time, Flamethrower does not knock me out, and I finish the Charizard off. However, then Red just sends in Espeon and finishes me on the next turn. Charizard KOs, Espeon KOs, Espeon KOs again. This is getting really old. You might be thinking that maybe I need 2 activations of the Quick Claw in a row, but I really don't. As long as I get it against the Charizard, I'll arrive at the Espeon with enough health, and then I can finish it off. And that happens here. Okay, so Meganium has made it to the Snorlax for the first time. I hit with Return and knock it out. Now, all that's left is Blastoise. Because my attack is set up, I go for Return. It doesn't get the KO. Blastoise strikes back with Blizzard, and Meganium just barely hangs on. I hit with Return one more time, and with that, I've got my first playthrough time. Meganium clocks in at 1 hour, 40 minutes, and 40 seconds. It had 16 resets, finished the game at level 75, and this took 5 hours and 43 minutes of game time. So let's summarize the results from my first playthroughs. The times started off very close together, and they remained extremely close until after Whitney. And then Meganium took a lead, which is actually a quite sizable lead, and this lead continued to improve all the way until it got to Blue, where it was faster than Venusaur by 6 minutes and 18 seconds. However, as is so often the case in Generation 2, Red was the decider, and Meganium had a massive time swing here just because it couldn't defeat the Charizard easily, whereas Venusaur, with access to Sleep Powder, had a path to victory. So the results ended up as I was expecting, Venusaur taking an easy victory over Meganium in the first playthrough. However, I'm wondering if Meganium, through optimization, might be able to hold on to its lead through Red. But of course, I am also going to be trying to improve Venusaur's time, and I know that it is going to be able to shave off some time, like I had some bad play against Morty in the previous playthrough. Also, for these follow-up playthroughs, I played them significantly later on, so now I am going to be able to skip Sprout Tower and save some time that way. The impact that this has is that I have to head into Falkner's gym at only level 10, and with a grass type you'd think that this would make Birdkeeper Abe's Spearow a little bit challenging. After all, Peck is dealing a lot of damage. However, since I'm starting with fully evolved Pokemon, he isn't an issue and I can move on to the gym leader. Now with Venusaur, the battle against Falkner isn't super straightforward because I can't set up a move like Reflect. I'm gonna have to 3-hit the first Pidgey, taking chip damage along the way, and then against Pidgeotto, I decided to use Growl to lower its attack 1 stage before attacking myself. And you'll see as it deals damage with Gust that this is very important because even with a berry, I only make it through the fight with 10 HP left over. Alright, so let's head on to Union Cave. I'm going to fight some optional trainers here, but not all of the trainers. So I'll battle the guy with the Wooper, it's good experience. After that, inside the cave, I'm going to battle the Hiker with the Onyx, as well as Hiker Russell with his 3 Geodudes. This gives me enough experience to level up to level 15, where I can learn Sleep Powder in the place of Leech Seed, and then I fight the trainer with the Slowpoke for some additional experience, as well as Hiker Anthony outside of the cave. Now, in my previous playthrough, I did have a mistake against the Rocket in Slowpoke Well. This time, I am much more careful so that I'm going into this fight with more than enough PP, and as a result, no reset here this time. So now let's take on Bugsy, and Venusaur has no issues here. I can use Sleep Powder to break Scyther's combo with Fury Cutter, and the fact that I am a poison type means that I am taking far less damage anyways. So Venusaur takes an easy first attempt victory. The rival outside of Azalea Town is no problem because I have access to Sleep Powder, which can easily counter his Quilava. After that, I can take Whitney out. By the way, if you get a critical hit with Razor Leaf at level 25 against the Miltank, you can knock it out in one hit. Alright, so after finishing off all of the Lighthouse stuff and leveling up to level 31, let's take on Morty. Now the safest play here is to just use Sleep Powder against all of his Pokemon. I'm going to get 2 hits with Mud Slap on his first 2 Pokemon, and then a 3 hit against the Gengar. I actually made a small mistake here using Mud Slap against it on the first turn. I really should have gone for Sleep Powder and then for Mud Slap. However, I had the Mint Berry, so that wakes me up, and as a result, I am able to knock the Gengar out. All that's left is Haunter. This Pokemon is really not that good. As a result, I can finish it off with 2 uses of Mud Slap, and Venusaur has defeated Morty with no resets. Chuck is very easy, also Price is really easy too, so that leads me to Jasmine. Against her, Mudslap only has a 55% chance to knock the Magnemites out, so for that reason I have brought a Paralyzed Cure Berry into this battle. I figure that I'm going to one-shot at least one of them, and I'm hoping that it's going to be the first one, and in this case, it is. So I move on to the Steelix without a status condition. Because it's part ground type, using Razor Leaf against it makes the most sense, and I get a 2-hit KO. All that's left is one more Magnemite, and I get the 1-hit once again. And now, inside of Radio Tower, I'm going to make a major update to Venusaur's rooting. And that is, when I have the chance to learn Growth, I am not going to learn it. While it was helpful in the last playthrough, what I really want is more attacking moves, and I can use Sleep Powder to essentially make up for any of Venusaur's weaknesses. The combination of both Sleep Powder and Growth on my moveset constrains it a little bit too much, and also using a setup move repeatedly after using Sleep Powder wastes a lot of time. It's time to fight Petrol at the top of Radio Tower. This fight is a bit annoying because I can't one-shot any of his coughings with Return. As a result, I'm going to have to put the first few to sleep before I knock them out so that he doesn't set up with Smokescreen or hit some big self-destructs. However, the fact that Venusaur is a poison type for this battle is a huge advantage for it. Right now, it doesn't really look like it matters. He kind of seems easy, but hold on to that because this does really matter. Continuing on, I defeat the rival in the underground. I really wanted Mudslap specifically for this battle, but with this battle out of the way, I can now teach Hidden Power in its place. And for this playthrough, I have chosen Hidden Power Rock. I've chosen this typing specifically to counter Charizard on Lance's team as well as on Red's team. And now as I go up against Claire, I think you can see why giving up Growth was a good option. Now I have a choice between Razor Leaf, Hidden Power Rock, or Return, and that I can use Sleep Powder to get around Pokemon that are a little bit more annoying. Like, I guess I could have gone for it against Claire's Dragonairs because I don't have guaranteed 1-hits here. However, that isn't actually the safest play because Return has an 88% chance to knock them out, so using Sleep Powder with a 25% chance to miss is just less reliable. Unfortunately for me, that means I'm paralyzed going into the Kingdra. However, it doesn't have a move that can deal particularly good damage to Venusaur. Like, look at how much damage its Hyper Beam does. I easily survive, hit Return, and with that, I have defeated Claire. Alright, so another advantage of Hidden Power Rock is the fact that it counters a bunch of Will's Pokemon. However, before I go into that fight, I am going to do something that I very rarely do in Johto, and that is use rare candies earlier on. What I figured out is that Venusaur is strong enough with Sleep Powder that I don't really need to save these until just before Red. So using them earlier on before Will improves my chances throughout the league, as well as against all of the trainers that I am going to fight in Kanto. After all, if I can get more 1-hits, then I will speed through these sections of the game. Alright, so now let's see Hidden Power against Will. Obviously it's super effective against both of his Xatu and his Jinx. It gives me guaranteed 1-hits on all of them. So now all I have to do is knock out an Executor, which is not particularly good, and then a Slowbro, which is weak to Razor Leaf. So Venusaur takes a first attempt victory over Will in its second playthrough. That is much better than the first playthrough. And we've actually made it to Koga just under 1 hour of time, which is quite good. Hidden Power Rock is also useful here against some of his Bug-type Pokemon. It also does more against his Crobat. This thing is a little bit annoying because it loves to set up Double Team and then he uses a full restore, but I still don't miss and I knock it out. And because I haven't taken any damage to this point in the fight, Koga is no more. Let's move on to the next trainer, which is Bruno. And yeah, he's not a problem for Venusaur. Easy victory here, and that leads me to Karen. Now previously I went into this fight at level 53, and now I'm level 59, almost about to level up to level 60. What this does is it gives me much better damage ranges. I have a guaranteed 2-hit on the Umbreon. Unfortunately it got really annoying and lowered my accuracy twice, and then I miss on the Houndoom, which is frustrating. It hits Flamethrower, taking me down to orange health, and then I hit Hidden Power, which is a guaranteed 1-hit. Next is Vileplume. I'm going to need to knock this thing out with Return. I considered using Sleep Powder, but since it is under a 50% chance to hit, I decided that it wasn't a good choice and knocked it out with 2 uses of Return. Unfortunately, this does mean that I'm paralyzed, moving on to the Gengar. Now it could have finished me off with Destiny Bond here, but it just spams Lick, and I knock it out with Hidden Power Rock. However, I only have 22 hit points left over for the Murkrow. It goes for Feint Attack, and Venusaur survives on 2 hit points, Hidden Power works, and Murkrow goes down. I can't believe I made it through that fight. After the bad luck against the Umbreon with Sleep Powder, I thought it was over, but this is the reason that I always play fights out, because if I just reset, then I would have lost a little bit of time, and seeing the fight through, I still did get a victory. Alright, so Lance is going to be really easy. I have Sleep Powder, which is helpful so that I don't get paralyzed, that sort of thing. And then I have Hidden Power, which can 2-hit all of the Dragonites when it doesn't get a critical hit, like it did here. Also, it's worth noting that I have a guaranteed 1-hit on the Aerodactyl as well, which is really nice. Obviously, Charizard goes down to 1 hit. I put his Ace Dragonite to sleep just because it does have Fire Blast, and I want to avoid that. And as a result, I'm able to get through the league with no resets. Alright, so jumping ahead through all of Kanto to Blue, I am maintaining the same moveset here. One thing that I'm always considering in these playthroughs is whenever I have to learn a new move, it actually takes time. I have to open up my menu, open up the TM, teach it in a place of a different move. I have to go slowly during this so that I don't accidentally delete a move that I can't get back, like for instance Razor Leaf or Sleep Powder. So in general, if I can just get a moveset and keep it throughout a long section of the game, I prefer to do that, and this is an area where Venusaur really excels. This thing is so good that it defeats Blue without taking any damage. So I did this at level 68, and I have 4 rare candies left over, so I'm going to use them now to take Venusaur up to level 72 before I face Red. You might wonder, why not level 73? Well, I have a 90% chance to one-shot the Charizard at level 72, and I figured that grinding against a few extra wild Pokemon was just not worth it at this point. Because here's the thing about Red. There actually isn't very much threat to Venusaur. I'm going to put the Espeon to sleep and knock it out with 2 uses of Return. After that I can knock the Snorlax out with 3 uses of Return. Then on Venusaur, I'm just going to put it to sleep and knock it out with Return. It takes 3 turns. After that, one-shot the Charizard with Hidden Power Rock, and then 2-shot the Blastoise with Razor Leaf to clock in with a time of 1 hour, 21 minutes, and 13 seconds, with 0 resets at level 73. This took 5 hours and 17 minutes of game time. So I was able to improve all of the metrics except for level. I just stayed at the same level throughout these 2 playthroughs. So overall, these results with Venusaur are incredible. It is slower than Celebi, Ampharos, and Ho-Oh, but it still earns itself a spot in the S tier. And now, the results that I've been waiting for. Let's see how fast Meganium can go through the game with optimization. The early game is essentially the same. Falkner is no problem because I have Reflect in the place of Growl, so I'm able to skip Sprout Tower. However, now that we're leaving Violet City, I do not have good news for any Meganium fans. The fact that I beat Bugsy as easily as I did in my first playthrough was 100% a fluke. During testing, I struggled to beat him just once going into the fight at any reasonable level. So much so that I actually considered using the move Flash to lower the Scyther's accuracy to break its combo with Fury Cutter and allow Meganium to survive. However, there are some big disadvantages for this strategy. The first one is the fact that Flash has 70% accuracy, so 30% of the time you're just going to miss and the Scyther is going to knock you out. The second problem with this strategy is that even if you lower its accuracy, it can still just hit every time and knock you out. The third and final reason that Flash is not a good strategy is the fact that you can't delete it once you've learned it until you get all the way to Blackthorn City. And I'm going to talk about why that is a bit of a problem later on in this playthrough. For now, just know that Flash is not the best option. The best option is defeating the rival outside of Azalea Town as fast as is possible. He is not nearly as hard as fighting Bugsy. I take a first attempt victory in this case, and that allows me to chase this Farfetch'd around and then get the HM for Cut. I can't believe I'm saying this. Yes, I am going to be using Cut in this playthrough because it is a good replacement for Tackle. You'll notice that going into the fight against Bugsy, my Meganium is level 20, and this is intentional. If I am level 19, this fight is way harder. I'm going to knock out the Metapod in 2 hits if it doesn't use Harden. In this case, I got unlucky, so I have to take it out over 3 turns. After that against the Kakuna, it is very important that I am holding the Poison Cure Berry, because if I am poisoned, the Scyther is going to knock me out. In this case, I move on without a status condition, and now I'm ready to face the Scyther. So the unfortunate thing here is that Cut has to hit every single time I select it. For me, it misses on the very first turn, so the only way I'm going to be able to win now is if Fury Cutter misses. Unfortunately for Meganium, it doesn't, and so Bugsy gives it its first reset. Now, in the very next battle, Cut once again misses, so I take another loss, which is very frustrating. There is no way to get around this, so unfortunately, I have 2 resets by the time I beat Bugsy. Let's compare the Bugsy splits, and unfortunately in this case, Meganium has a massive disadvantage, and I think that that is going to haunt it throughout the rest of this playthrough. Okay, so against Whitney, we can start seeing the problem that Meganium has on its moveset. It is now constrained because I cannot delete Cut until I get to Blackthorn City. So I'm going to have to beat the next portion of the game with only 3 move slots. And that creates quite a nuisance for me against Morty. In order to be able to get through this fight fairly consistently, I'm going to have to use 2 rare candies right now to level Meganium up from level 31 to 33. This is for damage rounding purposes, and it gives me a better chance to KO the first Ghastly and avoid Curse. With Mudslap, I have a 78% chance to knock it out, and I get it on the first turn, which is perfect. I assume that I am going to be cursed by the next Haunter, but in this case I get really lucky and it just uses Nightshade. I finish it off, move on to the Gengar, and here I have to get a 3-hit. However, I can hit 2 Mudslaps before the Gengar can put me to sleep with Hypnosis, and that allows me to defeat it. As was the case with Venusaur, the whole next portion of the game is very easy. So I get through Chuck, Price, and Jasmine with no resets. I do want to emphasize here against Jasmine that I don't have 1-hits on any of her Pokemon, even the Magnemites. And it's worth pointing out that at this point I haven't learned Synthesis, which really did a lot of great work in the previous playthrough, but I just don't have space on my moveset to learn it in this case. So, curses to you, Cut. This move is awful. I hate it. I'm really frustrated that I had to use it, but whatever. At least Meganium has good bulk, and I am able to defeat Jasmine. So now, I'm going to do something that I very rarely do, which is I'm not going to take on the Rocket plotline. Instead, I'm going to head through Ice Path to Blackthorn City so that I can finally get rid of Cut. And going through Ice Path also had a second effect, which is I pick up the TM for Rest, which I am now going to teach to Meganium right away. This might seem like premature use of this incredibly powerful move, but it is not. Believe me, because after the first portion of the Rocket plotline, I have to face Petrol, and this guy is so awful for Meganium. You'll notice that I have Body Slam on my set instead of Return, and this is because even Return does not get guaranteed 1-hits against the Coughing when Meganium is at level 41. I tried level 43, and it also does not give 1-hits, so there's no reason to level up anymore. I want Body Slam specifically so I have the chance to paralyze the Coughing, and this will hopefully prevent them from using one of their powerful moves. Self-Destruct, Sludge, or Smokescreen. I am also using the Poison Cure Berry so Meganium doesn't get poisoned, and Rest is on my set just so that I can recover in the case this fight gets really awful. Like, I could have my accuracy lowered, or I could get poisoned by the first Pokemon. Also, Self-Destruct will do a lot of damage when he uses it. Because I have everything figured out in this footage, watching this battle does not seem nearly as difficult as it actually was. I tested this fight so long to figure out what was the right option. In most cases, I was just missing the fact that I had to go to Blackthorn City first to obtain both Rest and Delete Cut. Once I figured that out, everything just started working in my favor, and I'm able in this playthrough to get Meganium through on its first attempt. With that finished off, I'm going to pick up Return, and then I'm going to buy 8 vitamins, 3 protein, and 5 calcium. Against Claire, I have a 78% chance to one-hit all of her Dragonairs. In this case, I get the favorable roll on all of them. Kingdra really isn't that good, like it chooses Surf against me. I have no idea why, and I finish it off with a second use of Return. So now, let's head to the League. And Meganium has an advantage here because it isn't a poison type against Will, so I don't need to use extra rare candies here. Instead, I can just rely on Hidden Power Rock to finish off all of the flying and ice type Pokemon, and then Return for the Executor and Razor Leaf for the Slowbro. Skipping using the rare candies earlier on allows me to use less of them just before Karen to take Meganium up to level 58. This gives me a 96% chance to 2-hit the Umbreon, a guaranteed 2-hit on the Vileplume as well as the Gengar, and 1-shots for the Murkrow and the Houndoom. With the Paralyzed Cure Berry, I don't have to worry about Stun Spore from the Vileplume, so the only flaw in Meganium's strategy is the fact that the Umbreon can use Sand Attack, but in this case it chose Confuse Ray instead, so I'm able to sweep Karen. So I've made it back to Lance. Previously he was similar to Bugsy. I got very lucky against him, but I don't need luck now with Hidden Power Rock. I can 2-shot all of the Dragonites and 1-hit both the Aerodactyl and the Charizard. Okay, so let's take on Red. Here, I'm level 70. I was able to cut a little bit of extra training from Meganium's playthrough. Also, I want to note some of the key quirks of this moveset. I have Earthquake, which is there specifically so I can one-shot the Pikachu so it can't use Charm against me. Return is not guaranteed to one-hit, it only has a 35% chance to do so. Next he chooses to send in Venusaur, which I can knock out with 3 uses of Return, and then against the Charizard I have a 74% chance to one-hit. I get it in this case, and from there, things are going to be much easier. I can take my time to heal up against Pokemon like the Snorlax. This is a bit scary because if it gets a critical hit or paralysis at the wrong time, Meganium can go down. However, I get lucky here and finish it off on my first attempt. All that's left over is Blastoise. It's a little bit scary with Blizzard. I'm having to use Rest a lot, but in the end, it runs out of the powerful Ice type move. I wake up and finish it off. So Meganium clocks in with a time of 1 hour, 25 minutes, and 39 seconds, with 2 resets at level 71. This took 5 hours and 32 minutes of game time. So it is time to crown our winner. Of course, in this case, Venusaur was faster than Meganium. It beat it in both real time, resets, and game time. Also, Meganium's time is just not quite fast enough to earn it a spot in the S tier. So today, it clocks in with a time just 8 seconds faster than Lapras, earning itself the second spot in the A tier. Coming up next week, we are going to continue this starter series with Charizard vs Typhlosion. So like, subscribe, and ring the chime echo so you're notified when that video comes out. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video. It is time to let the credits roll, and while we do that, I'm just going to talk about a few updates for the channel. I just got back from vacation, which was incredible. It was nice having a week away from Pokemon-related things, but I am now ready to get back into the playthroughs. So coming up in June, the first few weeks of the month are going to be pretty slow. We're going to finish off this starters series. After all, each one of these videos is fairly large. After that, we are going to have a very exciting Father's Day special, followed by the Shiny Poochyena run in Pokemon Emerald. Then towards the end of the month, we'll head back to Generation 1 for another solo challenge, as well as experiment with some fluctuating growth rate Pokemon in Emerald version. I am really excited to give Crawdaunt a run. I think that one is going to be very fun. And then at long last, in the very beginning of July, I am hoping to finally release the Parasect race. It's going to be basically a year in the making at that point, and I am very eager to get it out there for all of you to watch. so stay tuned for that. I really appreciate the support, everyone. We have so many supporters now, like I can't even fill the time if I was going to play this sequence at regular speed. So seriously, thank you so much, because it does mean the world to me. Also, just one last note before I conclude, I am going to be starting streaming again. However, that's likely to happen partway through the month of June. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of time to adjust coming back from the vacation before I start expecting myself to do one stream and one produced video every week. Also, we will be continuing with the stream highlights videos, so don't worry, if you like watching the streams in a more condensed format, that is going to continue. Alright, so that's it. I'll see you in my next video.